Welcome to Trauma Recovery Anonymous, the podcast. My name is Richard and I am your host. As you all know, I'm a Christian recovery coach. But again, as you all know, there are many people who have been church hurt or who have any issues, concerns with God, or maybe God's been used as a weapon against them in some way to control or manipulate them. And they feel lost. There are those people who've been misdiagnosed with mental disorders, some 290 million adults, and some 120 million children. They can't go back to the person they were before. And they can't stay where they are, and they're looking for some other solution, whether it's spiritual or holistic, some other way of finding to deal with the past so they can get free of it. So on my journey on my podcast, I've been looking to find other Christians, but also people who aren't Christian, people who have other ways of dealing with life, more holistic practice, different spiritual practices that might help my audience to find a new way out of the doldrums of despair and depression that they feel. I do believe that depression and despair lives in the past and fear and anxiety lives in the unknown future. So if we can learn whatever practice we use to live in the present and live for these 24 hours only, then even break it down to this 1 hour. So for me right now, my hour is 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock with Cameron to get to have the best hour I have with Cameron now from 3:30 to 4:30. That's all I'm looking at, nothing else. And that's the idea behind it. We can learn to live 1 hour at a time. And Cameron today, as my guest, is going to share with you his experience, his strength and hope, his knowledge, his wisdom, his skills to help you find a way of living one day at a time. Cameron, you're very welcome.
No, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, let's get started. Jump in there and tell us all about yourself, how you got on this path, what you offer, what you suggest. Just take it away. And I'll jump in occasionally, but the floor is yours, okay?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah. And I really, welcome the opportunity to have that conversation with you as well. So if something I'm saying is resonating with you, please, by all means, jump in. We can have a discussion or a debate about it. Thanks for having me. So I'm a qualified psychotherapist and also a psychic medium as well. So, I help a lot of people in a similar way that you are with this podcast. Really, it's about trying to help people really come back to who they are, really wake up to who they are, their true authentic self, and find real kind of healing in the process of doing that. And there's a part of that work which is quite grounded and boots on the ground grounded in humanity and relationships and people dynamics. And there is a part of that which inevitably is quite spiritual as well, which leads into the bigger question of who am I, in terms of am I here for a reason? Is this all for a purpose, or is this all just a load of nonsense? And I kind of work with people to help try and wake them up, really. Usually people come to see me because they're already in that process of waking up and they're just trying to maybe accelerate that a bit more. How did I get onto this journey? Through my own struggles, really, my own awakening, like a lot of other people. It's been a tough road. It's been a very bumpy track, I'd say. I was born into a Catholic family. It was a family that was quite strict. There was quite a lot of rules growing up. There was a lot of right and wrong. There was a lot of kind of perfection mindset, and there was a real drive and strive, I would say, for achievement, being successful. I say in inverted commas, and I say it that way because success, as defined perhaps by societal standards, by Hollywood or something like that, mostly money and job titles and things like this. So, yeah, it was a tough upbringing. It was pushed quite hard, pushed into a lot of sports. I think there was one point during my upbringing I was doing sports, certainly every day, but quite often 2 or 3 times a day, different sports. It wasn't something I particularly enjoyed, and I certainly didn't enjoy being exhausted all of that time. And studies as well were pushed quite hard. There was quite a bit of pressure to get good grades at school. Thankful that, I did get good grades in the end, but did I have to work so hard? I'm not so sure that was entirely necessary. And, along that way, everything, I think everything happens for a reason, personally. And, when you look back, sometimes you don't understand the reason until you look back. And, as I look back on that time, I kind of can make a bit more sense of it. Hold on, let me just turn that off. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, when I look back, I think I can make a bit more sense of it, where what that was essentially doing was teaching me to ignore my body, ignore the signs in my body, ignore the signals that my body was sending me. But my body was sending me signals of, you're exhausted, stop, have a rest, have a break. I'm sure you can relate, right? We've all been in times and situations where, we're just pushing it too hard and we're not listening. And, essentially what happened then is I kept running that course. As you do, your parents teach you a lot about how to behave in the modern world. And I took that and I went into science and technology, went into kind of space engineering, and ended up getting job roles in kind of aircraft manufacturing and manufacturing for space equipment. And all the while sort of pushing, taking what I'd always learned, ignoring the signs in my body and just striving for more. Fast forward a number of years and I went up through management. I got to an executive level in that kind of industry. And then I guess it wasn't all at once, but along the way, my body started failing me. I started getting sick. I started getting ill. I started getting terrible digestive issues, heartburn, upstairs, downstairs, you name it. And was on all kinds of medication. I think at the worst point, I was on about 10 different medications every day, trying to manage the symptoms, all the while still pushing. And eventually it did lead in, I would say, collapse, a total nervous breakdown, however you want to call it. But a real, I was in hospital with it, and it was a real moment of sort of, I could die, There was certainly moments where I'd life flash before my eyes, and I kind of thought, I need to do something different, It was quite frightening. Didn't know what to do differently. But it was at that point I started to reflect more. So I found meditation. Obviously, I'm skipping a bit here, but found meditation. And that started to allow some more space for my thoughts, space for what I wanted in life. I started to think about exactly that. What do I want to do in life? I'm not sure I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I didn't enjoy corporate culture. I didn't enjoy all the PowerPoint presentations, or the never-ending list of emails that have to be gone through, the churn, the daily grind. And that's when I thought, I took a moment to reflect on, I'd recommend this for people as well. I took a moment to reflect on, what were all the times in my life up to now, including being a child, where I really got lost in the moment. Where time really stopped, where I really felt like I was in my flow, really felt like I was enjoying myself. I don't know. Does anything come to your mind when you think back like that?
Well, I have to say, I'm listening to what you're sharing, and there's things jumping out at me. Now, I wasn't thinking about were there times in my life when I had joy. You spoke earlier on about waking up. That was a beautiful concept. I've had spiritual awakenings, but I never had the idea of waking up not spiritually. Like I never put those pieces together that I could wake up not spiritually. It had to either be spiritual awakening or I was like, I was stuck in the groove. So that was really nice to hear. And then on top of that, our parents, God help them. I mean, I'm a parent now today, and I want the best for my kids. And my wife is fantastic at kind of driving my kids to do things, and striving to do the modeling gigs and what they're doing, they're loving. But she wants the best for them, and she's kind of like the driving force in our home to drive forward her to. They're both in university. They're in their early 20s. They're doing what they want to do in university, but outside of that, both getting them involved in all these different kind of outlets and modeling and performance and whatever, and they love it. So at least they're doing something that they like. But I think, in hindsight, my parents, my father's a retail business. And he got the 3 sons involved in the retail business. And the girls went off to college to do computer science and whatever. And us three brothers side by side, we're going to run the business and make it into a big empire and have stores all over Europe, the tyranny company, whatever. And of course, brothers fall out, and especially when they get girlfriends and wives, and the wives don't like you there. Before you know it, there's like anarchy. Remember my father died, we kind of fell apart. But in hindsight, my father strived to get us jobs that would give us good lives. Now, the fact that...
Absolutely.
Yeah, but the fact was that just we didn't fit into that group. My older brother stayed in the business. My older brother went off to start his own business. And I went from out of the retail business to become a trauma recovery coach. It's amazing the way when we find our own path, it could be completely different to our fathers. But that's not to knock our parents, because their parents wanted the best for us. And if I'd stayed in the business, it would have been a very, very lucrative life. Except, like you said, all that drudgery about emails and meetings and PowerPoints. Some people are born to that and they fit into it, that groove naturally. And they'll stay in that job till the end of their days, and they go home, they go to their graves happy that they stayed the course. But the people like yourself and myself, we just don't fit that. We just changed and we don't fit anymore. So I don't want to knock our parents and say they were bad parents who were trying to give us a good life, because that's what they were trying to do. But some of us don't fit that. Now, to come to your last point about if I had good moments, yeah, I like when I'm not under pressure. At one stage in our business, we didn't have targets. You just go in and you look after customers and you do your work. And then we got this CEO into our company who's going to help propel it forward. And he started giving us monthly sales targets. You had to hit this target and then increase it. And the joy of the whole job went out the window. And suddenly someone was over your shoulder watching every move and making sure you followed their T's and crossed the T's and dotted the I's. And I hated the job. I went from loving the job to hating being in it every moment. So there was, when I have freedom to express myself, that's when I feel that joy you're talking about. But when I allow other people to manipulate me or to, again, my parents wanted the best for me, and I think that in one way they wanted to express life through me. They want to express themselves through their son or whatever. And I have to learn not to let other people manipulate what I do for their benefit. It has to be for myself. So that's probably the best way I can answer your question is if I'm doing it for myself and I allow myself to fail. If I'm going to fail, it's okay to fail. Like I'm just doing my best. Then that's important. Yeah, that's the way I can enjoy it. I can actually enjoy it. And if I fail, I'm not beating myself up. I'm not blaming myself. I'm not knocking myself down. I'm human. It's okay to fail. I learn from my mistakes. Maybe next time I won't fail. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And you need to fail, right? It's the only way you get. It's the only way you stop failing is because you failed all the times before. Yeah, very good.
That's a very good point. I'm glad you said that. For the audience, it's okay to fail. We're meant to fail. And when we stop failing, we're experts. But until that moment, we're going to keep failing, and it's okay. Every time you change paths, you go from being single to being married, God forgive you, you're going to have so many failures as a husband or as a wife because you're not used to being in a relationship. You start a new job, it's totally alien to you. You start, whatever you do, you're going to have failures. Don't beat yourself up over them. Go on, Cam, I want to just mention that there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important. And yeah, I'll just echo your point and reiterate that, our parents, certainly my parents, they absolutely did want the best for me. And they grew up in a different generation from the world, a different world from the world we're in right now. They were fresh out of World War II. And, in that world where everything was crumbling and broken, that, the narrative was almost like, let's build again, let's rebuild. And that was sort of the drive then for that whole generation was let's go from nothing to having something, and a lot of that focused around money. My parents, they didn't even have a bathroom in their house. So when you grow up in that environment, you set your focus on, let's get a bathroom. And that then becomes the most important part for your life. So no, I really appreciate and respect,
Cameron, I got to tell you, both my parents didn't have a toilet in their house. It was at the bottom of the garden. In both cases, my father's from Tipperary, my mother was from Mount Marion, and the toilet was in the back garden. You want to go to the toilet, you had to go down the back, through the orchards. So this was the shed in the back garden. Yeah. So I haven't thought of that in 50 odd years. Very fun. Yeah.
Yeah, they grew up in a time when there was no running hot water. They may not have been running cold water, and they couldn't easily have a bath or a shower or something. All these things that we take for granted. Well, they built that. That generation built that for us to enjoy. So sure, they may have some limitations in the modern world because they didn't grow up in the world that we live in today. But they certainly tried to do the best they could with what they knew based on their experience. But however, I was about to say, was it quite what I needed? I don't know. But when I look back at it spiritually, I think it maybe was what I needed. It just felt very challenging at the time. Because, speaking, you talked about your listeners maybe having kind of mental health challenges and this sort of view on the world. And I would say, all of that's coming more and more out of the woodwork these days. And, more people are identifying with, specific mental health conditions and sensitivities, I might add, and I would say I definitely fall into that bracket. I'm sprinkled on every spectrum, I think, to some extent. I would not an extreme extent on any particular one, but I can definitely resonate with a lot of it. And, what I've discovered is, when I started to sit back and look at the things I enjoyed in my life, the real moments where time stopped for me, they were moments of kind of private and intimate conversations with people. And so, one thing led to another, and I started to volunteer for a suicide organization, a telephone, anonymous telephone call organization designed to help prevent suicide, called Samaritans in the UK. And I started to do that for a few years, and I'd always had an interest in psychology, and that's what I would have studied at university, but my father wouldn't have allowed it. His view of psychology was it was too soft, it was too airy-fairy, it wasn't, inverted commas, it wasn't a real job, which is why I was kind of led into the more technical, logical engineering, stuff you can touch with your hands kind of route. But I was always fascinated with psychology, and this really woke it up for me. And so, I always recommend to people that if they are exploring possibilities in their life and areas of flow state that they want to get into where time stops, and areas that might improve the quality of their life, start with charity, potentially. It's low investment, it's low risk, and it's somewhere where you can dip your toe in the water and see if it really grows for you. I worked in that suicide hotline. And what I didn't realize at the time that I know now was some of my psychic and mediumship intuition was developing as I was getting into these really touching conversations with people. I kind of just had the words at the critical moments, and there were some critical moments on those phone lines as well. And I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. And I wanted to take it further, so then developed into psychotherapy and counselling, because I wanted to see how the story ends, really. These anonymous phone calls, they hang up the phone. You never get to find out a week later, a month later, hey, how's things going? Just checking up on you. You don't get any of that. So, I got into psychotherapy and counselling, and, I've been doing that now for about 7 years or so. And again, as I was developing that, what I didn't realise at the time is my psychic and mediumship intuition was building all of that well. And, cutting a long story as quick as I can. Ended up training in that over the last few years, and now
take your time, Cameron. Take your time. If we have to have multiple conversations, I'll have multiple conversations with you. Take your time.
Absolutely, happy to
join you.
But ended up developing those skills a few years ago, and now I give kind of psychic mediumship readings to people all over the world, including psychotherapy as well, and obviously the psychic mediumship for people who don't know, that's where you're kind of giving evidence that you're talking to loved people on the other side, who have passed. And by evidence, I mean specific evidence, experiences from their life, clothes they used to wear, personality types, behavior traits, difficult conversations that were had.
I say it's fantastic for people grieving to be able to touch into that. I'm a Christian, but I think we were given this earth to use to the best of our abilities. Maybe Jesus didn't do medium and he didn't do holistic practices, but that doesn't mean that we can't use them. We're in different times. What we have today compared to what your father had and my father had in his, you can't compare the worlds. They say we have running water, they didn't have running water. We can't say, well, we can't have running water now because they didn't have running water, so we can't use running water. That would be insane. All these holistic practices, Jesus healed with the hands, and then we have acupuncture, EFT, Reiki. These are all healing with the hands. And again, so if you've been blessed with the ability to be a medium, that's a gift from God. look at what anyone says, if you have it and you're able to help people grieve, that's something that you should embrace and celebrate. And I'm glad you sound like I'm not saying you're not celebrating it. You sound like you are. And it's really cool. I don't have it, but you have it. And it's a blessing you have.
Well, yeah, and I would challenge you there a little bit. I think we can all do this. I don't think it is a special gift that are only for the select few. It just takes that, I guess, piecing my whole story together there, it just takes that listening to your body, slowing down, falling into your authentic self, listening to the signals that your body's giving you. Because, I find so much, there's an excellent book called The Body Keeps a Score. And essentially, they've done studies on this. And what they found is things we repress in our mental well-being, our emotional state, have a way of finding themselves in the body. They have a way of, a really simple example for people to grasp is a tense jaw. We've all had that at one point, right? You wake up in the morning, you realize you've been clenching your jaw all night because you're anxious, because maybe you're angry at something, or maybe you feel quite frightened or scared. And the body then because we're not expressing it or struggling to express it, then the body has to find an outlet for it. And it can do that by panging all of our different organs. And you get sore shoulders. A good one if you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Yeah. You can get sore shoulders. And it's really, I think, the opportunities there. I went for training with 20 people who had never done it before. And by the second week, we were all doing it. Every single one of us. I've seen that it's something everyone has access to.
I think if you're focused on learning, if you're open to it, if you're closed to it, it's not going to happen. You have to be open to it. And I think that's the big thing. If you're open to it, So go ahead, Cameron. Thank you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think I've lost my point now. Where was I?
I apologize. You went off for a course with 20 people. And
and by the end of it, everyone was able to do it. And what I've learned through that now is that you talked about Jesus in a way. What I've learned from talking to people. I've spoken to Jesus. He comes through for readings. Like through talking to people, you give messages to people, and some of these messages come with a higher wisdom. As I say, Jesus has shown up for some people in readings. He's got he's unmistakable. It's him. Like, it's not, sometimes you might get a grandmother or a grandfather and you can't really see them that clearly, and you're trying to give me some more information, but when Jesus turns up, you go quiet. There's a strong presence in the room. He's very humbling, I don't, when it comes to religion as well, I believe it doesn't really affect the readings too much. Spirit will show up with the messages that you need to hear in the time and the moment that you need to hear it.
I have had messages like that, like mind-blowing ones that just shook me to the core. I never assumed that they were medium or anything like that. It was just a case of I'd be praying to God, I'd be meditating before I go to bed. In the middle of the night, I wake up with a kind of, oh my God, like that's what I need to do tomorrow, And it wasn't my plans. It wasn't my plans last night, but in the middle of the night, a voice told me to do X. And I do X, and it's like, it was so right doing X, but it came from somewhere other than myself. I went to bed that night, and that X wasn't in my mind in any way, shape, or form. But I did my prayer meditation. I went to bed, and in the middle of the night, about 3 a.m, I wake up in the start, and I'm kind of going, write that down so I won't forget it. So that kind of thing. Yeah, I do like that. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's important to go to bed with a notepad. This is when Spirit visit us. In our dreams. You may have even had it. So often somebody will say, "Oh, I dreamt about them last night, and it felt so real." Their past loved one, and that is them visiting in the dreams. When we go into that dream state, we drift off into the spiritual world a bit more. We get closer.
There's a particular time. Is it 4 p.m. or something? From 4 to 6 or something? Is that the spiritual awakening time or something? Is it?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, they say it's around 4 o'clock. Is that it's 3 to 5 or it's 4 to 6? Is that around 4 o'clock is the time when you wake up? That is a very good time to manifest or to connect with the dead, or not. I don't want to say the dead, but the spirits. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
or pray, they say at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And, I don't want to be, well, I guess for me as well, what's been really fascinating and interesting about this journey and about working with people is I was an atheist at one point. I grew up as a Catholic, and I find for me, it was the more punishing side of being Catholic, and I know the Catholic Church and helps millions of people across the world, and I'm not knocking it. But for me, again, I was a little bit sensitive, and there was a lot of rules about when I had to go. I had to go to church, school as well, like Catholic school, like extra classes in the evening. I mean, not the day-to-day school. And and then getting into a science and engineering course with peers of that mindset, there was a lot of atheism in the people I was with. And, I did come to terms with the idea that actually I'll only believe it when I see it, actually that if I can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And I was open-minded, but until I could measure something, it didn't exist. So, I think that contributed to some of my my health issues ultimately as I look back. But I was an atheist for quite a number of years down that route. Just kind of I had that view of, well, if there was a God, why would all these terrible things happen to people in the world? And just it doesn't make sense. And so I think the interesting part of this, and where I struggled for about the first year, I would say, of my mediumship development, was just trying to believe it. I would do, even for a whole year, I would do readings, and people would say, yeah, that sounds like my grandfather or something. And I would sit there going, oh my God, really? I can believe it because I've done this a few times now, but also I still can't wrap my head around it. And what really changed that process for me, and what really helped me in transitioning, was this idea of data. This data prospect took me from atheism and a science-based approach to believing, because, believing, and I'd say now knowing, is, the path I found myself on was one of near-death experiences. If you're familiar, yeah. There's a lot of data out there on near-death experiences. There are tens and tens of thousands of people who have had them. And I started listening to podcasts at first. There are podcasts out there just dedicated to people giving their near-death experience stories. And, once you start listening to 5 people, 10 people, 100 people give their near-death experience story, and you realize that although they're all different to some extent, they're all quite similar to some extent as well. And you talk about people, they pass over, they meet their loved ones, they might go for a life review, they might reflect back on all the things they did in their life. And the data for me was really starting to mount up. And so that's where my curiosity deepened, and I thought, yeah, maybe there is something to this actually. And I guess something about being a therapist and good at maybe listening and being with people in conversation, you can tell when somebody's lying in a way, or I like to think I can. I get humbled every now and again, as we all do. But once you start hearing more and more people just telling their authentic story about what happened to them when they died, and then obviously they came back to life, you start to realize, I think there's a bit more to this than meets the eye.
Again, it's just like a miracles. I mean, the numbers of miracles recorded, are thousands. You go into Google, there's records of miracles happening again and again. And it's not like changing water to wine or something, but there's actually I shared that in a previous podcast. There's a video, I don't know if it's still on YouTube, but it was this woman she's got cancer. She goes to see these 3 Christian doctors, and they stand over her body. They have a camera on her cancer, and their hands over her body. They're praying and doing kind of chanting over the cancer. And you can see the cancer on the screen of the TV getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, because they're chanting and hands over and praying to heal this woman, that it goes from this big blob in her chest down to nothing. And they go on to do the CT scan or whatever, and this cancer is basically shrunk to nothing. All this stuff is possible. Now, for my audience, I'm trying to come at you with a completely different perspective. I want you to know that you can heal yourselves. It's not down to you waiting for somebody else to fix you. My whole goal of this podcast is to get people like Cameron on who can tell you that you can heal yourself if you change your attitude, your outlook, your perspective. If you can learn to use my last podcast, the lady said that words are energy. And whatever we focus on in our words, we're creating that energy in our body. So if we can learn to change our talk from I'm no good, everyone hates me, I've got depression, to I'm happy, joyous and free, and I'm in love, and I'm blah, blah. If we learn to use our language in a more healthy, loving way, we'll heal much faster than all the medication in the world. Back to you, Karen.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I often say to people, if your best friend came to approach you with the exact stress that you're under, the exact situation that you're under, the exact, I don't know, failure, right? We've talked about that you've just gone through. What would you say to them? And usually those words you would say to your friend are a lot kinder than the words you would say to yourself. And you have to start befriending yourself. You know, you have to start showing yourself the same compassion and the same patience that you show other people. You can't hate yourself into a life you love. You know, you can only love yourself into a life you love. And
repeat that one more time, please. That's fantastic. You can't hate yourself.
You can't hate yourself into a life you love. If you're spending all your time hating yourself, guess what you're going to end up with? A life that you hate, ultimately. And so it's easier said than done. You know, it takes time and it takes practice, and talking to somebody, sometimes talking to a professional can help with these things. There's a lot you can do with yourself, but it definitely starts with compassion. You know, try and imagine that you were your own best friend coming to talk to you. Hey, you know, my partner's just left me. I feel like a real failure. I'm ashamed, you know, and you might say to your friend, hey, buddy, it's all right. It was complicated. You know, there was all these dynamics to it. There was a lot of things out of your control. You tried the best you could. Sure. You know, I'm your friend, so I'm going to tell you, yeah, maybe there's a couple of things you need to work on. You know, maybe your temper or something like that. Maybe you could get some help there, but you're a good person. Your heart's in the right place. You mean well. You're trying your best. We're all just here to learn. You know, that's the kind of love that can change your life.
Cameron, have you heard of Michael Singer? He wrote a book called
No, I haven't.
He wrote a book called The Untethered Soul. And I have to tell you guys out there, really The Untethered Soul is the greatest gift you can give to yourself. A guy called Michael Singer, he's been on Oprah or whatever, but he says, what I want you to do is to get your hands on a dummy. You know, one of those dumb mannequins? Imagine you have a dummy, put it on the couch beside you, and imagine all the thoughts you normally have during the day about how much you hate life and you hate yourself. Give those voices to the dummy, and then imagine that dummy is you talking. And you know, within 3 minutes, you get up and leave that couch, you go somewhere else. You wouldn't sit there and listen to someone berate themselves so much. If you can see your behavior, like you said, in somebody else, and you can see that behavior going on all the time, undermining yourself, berating yourself, finding every mistakes in everything you say and do, you'd be kind of thinking, get out of here. I don't want to be anywhere near you. But we're doing that to ourselves. When we get into, especially with depression, I had depression for a number of years. I got so suicidal and I got so full of self-hatred. And I pushed everybody away. I wanted someone to hug me and to hold me, but I wouldn't let them. I pushed them away because I didn't want anyone to get close to me. They had to see me suffering to know I had depression. And as much as I wanted to be held by my mom and my dad, at the same time, I couldn't let them hold me because I'd lose it. So we get in that very quagmire place of pushing people away when really want to hold us. And the trick is to stop pushing and say, okay, listen, I don't want you to fix or save me. But in this moment, I could do with a hug. And then maybe when you get depressed, what do you do? Then whatever they do, copy what they do. And in time, you'll build up an arsenal of healthy coping skills. But we have to take a chance and ask somebody. Whereas Cameron's website and ask Cameron to sit down and give you some advice or some suggestions or some tips and ideas. Don't be afraid to ask. Cameron can say no. Cameron can say, I charge for my services. But at least you've asked. You may say, yeah, no, I have a free tools here. I have this, that, and the other. Or I can give you a 15-minute preliminary chat before we decide anything. Don't be afraid to ask myself, Cameron, whoever you see that has a message for you, that offers you hope. don't be afraid to ask. They can only say no, but they might say yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. And, I think it's, you make a good point as well, thinking about your listeners where there's so much, I mentioned it before, there's so much sensitivity these days, I like to call it. It can come with bad connotations, that word sensitivity, but I think it's a gift. I think it's a real strength and a real quality. And, I think there's a spiritual aspect to that. I think there's people who have maybe a bit of autism, or certainly people with ADHD and other kind of, what the Western medicine might say, or maybe disorders, mental health disorders or something, I would say are people who are closer to spirit, closer to spirituality. And because of that, they have a stronger sense of who they are. And what I mean is their authentic selves, who they really are. And because they have a stronger sense of their authentic selves and who they really are and how they want to live their life, they feel the pressure harder when they're living a life that's not theirs. They feel that grind that's deeper. It cuts deeper for these people when they're living someone else's dream, or just doing all these corporate emails that have no meaning and value in it, because they know ultimately deep down, they might not know in the front of their mind, but somewhere in their body, they know I'm meant for more, or I've got more to offer this life. I've got more to give. I've got things I need to say. I've got people I need to connect with, and I've got a gift somewhere. I'll describe it in sessions with people where what they're feeling there, that tension, that stretch, that pull, is potential. And it is quite hard to name it as a feeling, because you're kind of naming the absence of something. You're kind of naming a void that you feel. But, I think a lot of people with these conditions, they have that restlessness about them. They have that itch that needs scratched, and that it's their potential that they feel. They feel, I'm living a certain way. I might be getting all the bills paid and things like this. I might be living some definition of success by somebody's standards, but I feel something's off. Something's wrong. There's a gap, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is. And that is where they feel like they've got more potential to offer the world. And that's a lot of the work I do with people, is trying to help them realize that. Because I'm a big believer that if we had, how can I put this? If I believe our natural state is our authentic selves. That's the state where we rest, where we relax. We don't have to try hard. We don't have to pretend to be anybody. And I believe that's our natural default. And what happens is, along the way, along life journeys, growing up in the environments we grew up in, with the challenges we have, we get blocks. We put on armor, we put on shields, and we have to perform a certain way. Think of a corporate environment. I keep going back to corporate, don't I? But it's a good, just an easy example, where there's a language you have to speak. You're allowed to say certain things. You're not allowed to say other things. You can't be your truly authentic self in a lot of places in life. And so what I try and do when working with people is we discover all the blocks, really. It's less about finding our true authentic selves and more about removing the blocks that are stopping us from being our authentic selves. Because I believe our journey here, in many ways, is to find our way back home. And by back home, I mean back to ourselves, back to who we really are, to wake up to who we really are and live a life that we feel, ourselves, we feel at home in. I imagine I'm making a leap here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine you can resonate with some of this, given where you live isn't the traditional route for somebody coming from Ireland. And so I imagine I can see
completely. It really is a really good. You're the second podcast I've had on this week who spoke about the authentic self, and the goal is to achieve a sense of your authentic self. I mean, for a Christian, that's coming to connect with God and be one with God, and it's the same thing, being your authentic self. I saw some series, I don't know if it was a movie or a documentary, but someone's working as a bookkeeper all their lives and doing a great job, but it's like a slog. It's like they're going to, it's like they're in this penance of they're doing a great job, but deep down, they're a dancer or they're a painter, and they never allow themselves, because the parents said there's no money in painting or dancing. And finally, someone says, okay, I want to take a 6 months leave of absence and go off painting or go off to whatever it was. And the life in that person by doing that was the most profound. You see this person and they're dressed in real colourful clothes and they're scraping by on cheese and crackers and water, but they're painting or they're dancing and and they're renewed life. They found their authentic self and they're having that wonderful dream. And I think many young people are being conditioned because the world is so hard. The parents want the kids to get a job. They really can't give them a lot of money, but they want to get a job, that they're going to get a job in a house and whatever. And the push is to get your kids to get into a job, a paying job. But the kids nowadays, I think, they're much more free spirit. They're much more like they want to paint and dance and sing and whatever they want to do, and TikTok, whatever. But they want to do something that has more freedom. And they're being kind of pushed into a role that was suitable 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, that may not be suitable today. And so they're feeling very trapped, like I said. And if they can learn to unblock whatever those blocks are and to find their authentic self, that can be half the problem. It isn't like the fact that they have ADHD or they're OCD or whatever. It's the fact that they're living a lie. That's why they feel so blocked and so kind of not real. And it can manifest as a mental disorder or emotional disorder. But the truth is, they're living a lie. They're not their authentic self. I think that approach you have is really beautiful. I'm now living in Thailand. I'm 7,000 miles away from where I grew up. I compare myself to back then. I am so different. There's nothing of me left that basically was the same person I was over there. Again, I'm a trauma therapist. I've worked with addiction and so on. Did a lot of charity work. I'm a born-again Christian. I'm not a member of any denomination. I'm not a member of any church. But I have a Bible and I read it morning, noon, and night. And I'm in the car, my wife's saying to me, who you arguing with? Or are you praying? I say, I'm praying. And any waking moment to get out of my head, because I suffered depression for about 5 years of my life, my 20s. And my go-to safe place is depression. I go to victim in a split second. It doesn't take any time at all for me to go to depression, to go into victim. If it turns out you look at me sideways, Cameron, I'm thinking, Cameron hates me, and I go to depression in a split second. Mm-hmm. So it takes hard work to not react to what the face Cameron's putting on him, or how he speaks to me, or what he says to me, not to take it personally. To know that Cameron's voicing his opinion, and I'm collateral damage. He's not attacking me. He's just, that kind of stuff. If we can learn that we're not the target, there's no target on our head. That if someone says something that offends us or hurts us, we're collateral damage. It wasn't about us. But if we can learn to be true to ourselves, and like you said, if maybe you can't become your authentic self, we can start breaking down those blocks. That is, you get closer to the goal. And I love your message, Cameron.
Yeah. And, a lot of people obviously would think, well, that's all very well. I can't just go and be an artist. I've got a mortgage to pay. I've got, 6 kids at home with mouths to feed. And I've got to keep going in and doing all these emails that you're talking about all the time. And I guess, what I say to people in those situations is start small. Start small. You're right. You can't just walk away from all your responsibilities, especially if there's other people dependent on it, but start small. You have to start. And, the momentum, it is frightening, right? Because you're stepping off the well-trodden path. You might be stepping away from a path that your parents have told you your entire life, or society's told you your entire life is the correct path. So that's frightening. You're moving away from the herd. Of course, that's naturally frightening. And that's another reason to start small, because you have to face your fears, really, don't you, a little bit at a time and in manageable chunks. And the momentum comes, the motivation comes from the excitement and the joy that you feel doing it. So it's double-edged. It's stepping away and into the fear a little bit. But then once you start, let's stick with the art, once you start painting, and you start to think, wow, yeah, this is great fun. And, I'm going to add a bit more blue and maybe a bit more a white and a blue there. And before you know it,
I've got to tell you, just jump in very quickly. My aunt in her 60s and my father in his 70s, they both decided they'd take up painting. My father was terrible. He'd paint a house square, and a tree would be like a child's painting. I mean, he painted, but he knew his painting was shite. But he just painted because it was great relief from working all day long in a retail business. He'd paint, and he knew no one liked his paintings. They were if you looked at it, you'd think some 12-year-old child painted or something, or some 5-year-old painted. It really was pretty crap. But my aunt painted, and she was a natural. She never painted in her life, but she had this thing to paint. She painted the most fantastic watercolors and pastels. And the club they were in, the golf club, put on a show and put up the paintings. And of course, my father wouldn't put any of the paintings up. But my aunt Anne, she's dead now, she sold every one of her paintings. They sold it for about 70 quid each. Like this, she wasn't looking to sell them. She wasn't looking to make any money. She just was a show. And they said put a price on them, and she put a price of 70 quid. Like, that no one would buy them. She sold about 12 paintings in one night, and she had people that ordered. So she, from someone who hadn't painted all her life and never went painting, something in her told her to paint, and she became this. She was popping out paintings 200 quid a go, and now she's passed away. My father, God helped him, he did them until he died at 83. His paintings were shite, but his name that he painted them, but he found great enjoyment. So it doesn't matter how good or how bad you are. If you find something like painting or dancing works for you, for me, it's singing in the shower. I won't sing in public, but I sing in the shower. I sing my head off. I sing whatever. I make up my own words. But in the shower, if I sing, I feel glorious. I feel like whatever, one of these famous singers. I'm in the shower singing on my own. No one's listening. So
yeah. Amazing. And that's an expression of your true, authentic self, and that's why it feels so good. If you imagine anyone, you can just make this up. Picture someone living their best life. They're living their authentic self, aren't they? They're doing naturally what feels comfortable to them in the zone. And I believe spirit as well. I get this in readings from spirits and guides all the time as well, where spirit are on our side. They're here to help. They're not against us, and they leave breadcrumbs. They know what's in our best interests, and they know what will make us happy and why we're here and all those good things as well. And the trail of breadcrumbs, the clue, the compass to guide you towards that life you're dreaming of is excitement. It is happiness. It is joy. So this idea that, I can imagine it because I've been there. Well, I've got to pay the bills and I've got all these emails to do. How is painting a few pictures going to change anything? That's where you're missing the point. You have to just do it because you love doing it. And then by doing that, you allow spirits and all kinds of things to start helping you manifest the dream life that you want. Much like your, was it your auntie?
Yeah, my auntie. Yeah.
Much like her, where she just did it because she loved it. Suddenly she's selling paintings, and there's another clue in it. I like music, for example, creating music, and art, not so much. And why is that? Why do we all like different things? That's the clue that spirit are feeding me what's right for me, and they're feeding someone else what's right for them. And so there's a belief that my joy and my happiness can't support me financially. It can't set me up in a lifestyle. And sure, it may not happen overnight. We still live in a world, we've got rules and, there's certain conditions of living here that we have to live by. But it can't start until you start. You can't start living the life where you're happy all the time until you start doing the things that make you happy all the time. And it's got to snowball from there.
Brilliant, Cam. We're running out of time. I want to just say to the audience, go down to your local community centre, sign up for any class at all. It might be knitting, it might be sewing, it might be water aerobics, it might be painting, it might be pastel, oils, watercolours. Just sign up for 3 or 4 different courses, and maybe you'll find your niche. You'll find your, what would you call this? What's the phrase? You find your whatever feeds your soul, your joy. You'll find your joy. Try everything. Gardening, again, the volunteering. I'm not just in the suicide line if you're not in a good healthy space, but the dog compound. Going to the pet compound, going to the orphanage to play with children, the old folks' home. There's so many things you can volunteer for that may just find that you're a natural carer. There you are, stuck in your room, thinking you're no good to anybody. You go into the old folks' home, and suddenly you're a natural carer. And maybe you go to an orphanage to find out your great kids and you become a nurse or a pediatrician or something. There's ways you'll find your joy by taking chances. And the fact that you're actually volunteering, they won't say no, and your best will be good enough. It may be crap, but it'll be good enough because you're volunteering when no one else is. So don't be afraid to take a chance. That's what I want to say here. Listen to Cameron. Take a chance. what have you got to lose? You can stay at home, you can get out of the house and then go back home after if it didn't work out, but take a chance because people really want people to help. And you'll be surprised when you arrive at the doorstep, they'll welcome you with open arms. The fact you're volunteering to help, you'll be amazed. You're thinking you're not worth anything or people don't like you and they've no time for you. You volunteer at anywhere you go to, they will welcome you with open arms. So, Cameron, we're coming towards the end of the podcast. Can you share with the audience 3 things you suggest that maybe one about the spirit medium that they can try on their own, maybe when they go to bed, breathe, and then focus on nothing or whatever? Just 3 things you can share about meditation, about peak calm. And
yeah, definitely. In terms of becoming more in touch with your own mediumship skills.
Fabulous. That'd be lovely, yeah.
Yeah, a good one, a really simple one that a lot of spiritualist people will do, and it's easy to mock to start with, but I still say give it a go. Be open-minded. What's the worst that can happen, right? Is to ask your guides, your spirits, your loved ones to help you see repeating numbers. And what I mean is 1111 on the clock, or 222 on the clock, or you're behind a number plate on a car, a registration plate that says 444 or something on it. Or
my wife does this. We're seeing 444 every single day. We're seeing 444. It's hilarious. I swear to God, we're in the car today and Bo goes, look, and right in front of us there's one of these Chinese cars and the number is 1444. It's just so funny. We see every single day, she keeps asking for 444. It's a lucky number in Thailand here. And we're seeing 444. Yeah. So go for that. Just try that. It's wonderful. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a really easy way to get on the ladder of this, if that's the right way to term it. I'm not too sure I like that idea of a ladder, but yeah, it's a simple way and it's fun and it's just funny and playful. And, it's just spirit giving you a little wave to say hello. It can mean other things at times, but, and as you say, another way can be dreams, before going to bed, like maybe ask for clarity on something, ask for a visit from somebody in your dream. Just ask for some messages. And, shall I give a little bit more of an advanced one as well now, if you like, which you can try out, which is, when I was starting out mediumship, I thought I would start to hear something different. For example, if I was going to talk to someone in spirit, I thought I might hear a different voice from what I normally hear in my day-to-day life. But what I've realized and learned is actually you don't hear or see anything new or different from what you've done your whole life. It's when I hear someone talk in spirit, it's my own internal voice is what they use to talk to me. It just takes practice and time to finesse the subtle differences between me talking and them talking. And that just takes practice. There's no other way around that. But you can try this for yourself. So think of a question you might want to ask spirit. It could be a question about something stressful in your life or just something simple. I'd say start simple as well. Don't go in with how do I save the world? I mean, that's difficult, right? But just start with something simple. Think about your question. What am I going to ask? Formulate it in your mind. Practice saying it a few times. And then go to a quiet space. Take a few deep breaths. And as you go to ask that question in your mind out to spirit, the moment you start to say the first word, like what, you'll hear with your own mind, you'll hear the response, yes or no, or something in your mind. You'll just have this sense of knowing, like you won't even get to the end of the question. It'll be right there at the start of the question. And that can work really well because it really focuses your mind on broadcasting and when you're focused on broadcasting the message, spirit can slip in the receiving transmission in the message.
That's fantastic. The Christian idea is that you have a pen and paper, and when you do the question, you're going to get maybe 20 or 30 voices back. Write them all down. All the answers you get back, write them all down. And then you basically cross out the ones that you know are coming from you, the ones that are beating yourself up. The ones, what I'm talking about. So you do this for maybe half an hour, and you'll get about maybe 60 different thoughts that come in. And then the one that stands out, that's the spirit. So,
fantastic.
So that's the Christian way of doing it, and it really is fantastic. One other thing I'll say to you is a dream, and the difference in a dream and a nightmare is what you invite into your space. So if you're doing this practice, don't invite in the voices in your head that put you down, because then it turns into a nightmare. If you lay there and you're letting the voice come in saying, you're no good, you can't do it, this is a load of baloney, you'll go to a dark place and you'll just stop. So before you start, just say, okay, voices in my head, get a feck off for the next half an hour. You're not welcome here. I'm going to do Cameron's work. I'm going to sit here and listen to the spirits. And if you make that declaration out loud or in your mind, the voices will leave for half an hour. I swear to God, they'll leave for half an hour. You'll be shocked. You'll have peace of mind. And then go into that practice that Cameron suggested. Ask your question, lay still, and you'll get your answer. Cameron, I hope you don't mind me just throwing those two little things in there.
No, it's great. It's great. Could even maybe take the dream one just an edge further and ask your spirits as well. Ask your spirits to make sure they don't, those voices don't interfere. Quite often I'll get in readings that, we all have free will. All of us have free will. It's one of the most highly respected rules of this experience on no matter what side of the fence you're on, life or death. And so spirit, they can help us to a point, but they can't interfere. And it's just a rule. And if we want to suffer, they will have to sit back and let us suffer because it's our experience and we're in charge and we get to own it. But as soon as we ask for help, all of that breaks down. They want to help. They're dying to help. They're itching to help. No pun intended there. And as soon as we ask for help, just watch your world change, really. They can swoop in.
Cameron, thank you. Before we finish, can you list your social media, your website? Just before, now I'll add it all to the podcast when it's uploaded. But just for now, can you verbally say what your website is, how people can contact you, Facebook, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody wanted to contact me about maybe doing some deep sort of psychotherapy work, some psychology work, or mediumship readings from beyond as well, talking to past loved ones, healing messages from guides, or kind of body healing, they can contact me on my socials, which is at Cameron Psychic Medium on Facebook and Instagram. Website's currently under construction. So yeah, if you want to contact me, that's the best method.
At Cameron Psychic Medium.
At Cameron Psychic Medium.
At Cameron at Psychic Medium. Okay, thank you very much.
No, not quite. At Cameron Psychic Medium. That's it.
Okay. At Cameron Psychic Medium. My apologies, guys. Okay. Cameron, thank you very much. Those who came along tonight, thank you all very much. And we'll speak to you again.